In the state of Victoria this week in Australia, a cannabis patient had to front a magistrate. He fronted the magistrate under the unjust driving laws that exist in Victoria and across the country. This means that cannabis patients in Australia can't be driving. They are the current rules. Now, we've seen this week that there's a clinical trial being launched by the Vic Gov, but we're going to have to wait 2 years. What we go into today on Higher Living is a case last week in front of the magistrate, which was dismissed, which means that this patient is in Australia. He's legally driving on the roads, and we're going to tell you everything you need to know so you can learn from his experiences. Let's go. Mate, so you and I met in Peru, yeah?
Yep.
You were in Peru. I'm in Peru. The world aligned to bring us together. And since then, we've had a wonderful relationship. So it's an honor to be doing this with you today, man. So thanks for joining us.
Cheers, mate. Yeah, it is an honor.
We will get to something which I think is super important. So we've got Australian patients at the moment, and I think there's patients from other countries around the world that will be able to listen to what's happening, what's going to come out of today, because I think it's significant. And it's the reason why we've got our relationship. What has just occurred, I think, needs to be shared. So I can't stress the importance of how big this issue is. And we're talking about driving for cannabis patients. I can't stress how big this issue is. And we know of the discrimination. And where we're going to go to in this conversation is gaining an understanding around what's been occurring in the last week. And we are going to get to that. But I think along with this, and just so patients are aware, we're going to be providing information on exactly step-by-step of what has been happening so people can be agents of change, and we can utilize this platform, which is growing. So if you are enjoying this, please subscribe, like, and share with your friends so that we can spread this to more people and have more guests on like we have here with Mark. Before I continue, mate, we've done a nice little intro on you, but just, I think as a journeyman in this place, in this industry, yeah, from the very beginning, that you have been here, in your own words, mate, in your own words, who are you and what are you about at the moment? So give us some context.
Yeah, I'm Mark Smith. I started in this in 2015. I had the first license for CBD in Australia with a good friend of mine, Rangi Folder. And we started breeding and developing CBD genetics in the Hunter Valley and the Central Coast back in 2015. We were operational for nearly 2 years, and then the government decided to create the ODC, and they effectively wrote us out in legislation and crushed all of our investment and all of our development as well, which would have actually put Australia in a position where we were developing product for Australians. But that happened, and then I started, so that was Folium Industries I started out as, and then I somehow went from being a small-time cannabis farmer, hemp farmer in the Hunter Valley, and ended up meeting guys that were all over the world, and I've traveled all over the world. I've grown some plants in Italy and Greece and a few other jurisdictions. I've lobbied some governments. It's been a bit of a crazy ride.
And when you say you met some people, you're probably underplaying that with, we've done a reel at the start where you have been presenting a government, and we've obviously seen now some of those areas that you were early in, i.e. Thailand, just one example as well, for often now it's the new destination, right? It's the new hotspot, and you were there from the very beginning. It's probably something we can dive into in a little bit of detail, but just while we go on that, what's your sort of thoughts there? What input have you got there?
Thailand moved rapidly. So, after I got crushed, I was like, well, I'm going to go and make it happen in some other jurisdictions around the world. So I lobbied the Malaysian government and got a guy off death row there. They got a state of execution. That was back in 2017. And then was working with the Thai government, the Bujam Thai Party, and an advisor for King Number 10. And so Dr. Udon was his name. And so Dr. Udon opened some doors up in Thai government, and we were able to lobby Thai government and create some unique things to a cannabis industry. And they created the Buriram model, which was the high THC to facilitate the Thai traditional medicines, and also the non-Kai model where they could grow Kanchal, hemp, under license. And then from there, trying to remove the barbaric laws around cannabis, that they had as well, which was the death penalty. Slowly chipped away, and we got legality happening in Thailand much quicker than our own government.
Isn't it crazy to think about that a country where people were executed, executed, and now in a matter of how many years? 3 years, or was it 3 years? Yeah, in 3 years now, we've got over 3,000 licenses in Thai, and I know
there's a million licenses.
What? No.
There's a million licenses in Thailand.
Wow.
Yeah. So they've made a lot of progress, but they saw the socio-economic benefits of it, and so they moved rapidly. And Thailand's got a very unique health system. They're like number 6 or number 7 in the world, and they're very, very considerate of the health of their nation. So they moved rapidly from a health perspective, and they created an amnesty for patients. They allowed home grow for patients. And, something that we haven't even done in Australia as a collective, we haven't been able to manage to get that through. This whole industry is set up about patients, and they seem to be the forgotten factor in this all the time.
And I know there's so many things that you're passionate about personally, which we would love to go down. And I know touching on them at a high level, go into them, mate, because I know it's important for you to kind of get that message out. So, just in terms of your key points, what is it that you would like to see?
I'd like to see a patient amnesty. I'd like to see the true patients that are
explain what that is. If someone's listening to this for the first time, what does that mean?
Well, a young child that's got Dravet's and's having, from 10 to 500 seizures a day, or, refractory epilepsy, anything like that, or cancer patients, we still don't have product that's in the market that even facilitates a high dose to try and kill cancer. So the price is locking the real patients out. They don't have access to it. And if there was a patient amnesty where they could top up their own supply with homegrown product, well, why isn't that a compassionate angle allowed? We're not doing anything compassionately here. We're making it very rigorous for a patient to actually get product, and expensive. And it's sad to see some of the true activists and patients from the early days are still struggling to have enough constant supply at a price they can afford some peace for their children or themselves.
I've seen that you and I have had a number of conversations around this, particularly at the start of this year. We were going back and forward on a lot of these issues, and it could be something that we dive into in another day. There's no doubt about it, because I think it would be an interesting conversation. And I know they, even having a bit of a debate one day could be quite interesting, right? Just so people are aware of what are the different perspectives. Because if people don't even know there's other perspectives that exist, people then don't know that there's different options. And I think that key point brings us into a bit of a segue into a significant event that we see happening at the moment. And what we see is a major obstacle and something that is completely unjust when we have a look at patients that are utilizing benzos, right, or patients that are on opioids, and then we have our cannabis patients where they're not allowed to drive. And then there can be significant consequences in terms of criminality. But then also as well, let's think about those patients. Generally, they're patients with complex medical needs. And you and I both know what that's like. And so other patients out here that are listening at the moment and familiar with the spoons that get allocated on a daily basis. And sometimes by the time you get up, you're exhausted all your spoons, and all it takes is one thing to tip you over the edge. And so when we have a look at the constant stress, the constant anxiety, the surveillance that occurs for patients if they are taking the choice to have their medicine and drive, you can see that this adds a considerable weight to their quality of life and to their mental health and to their overall potential recovery, which isn't being spoken about enough. And that's not. And it can be a huge issue, correct? Yeah, like we know, they say the market is going to widen when we know driving laws change. And that's why it's so important for what's gone on in the last week. But before, I think what's helpful is that context of kind of understanding impact. And before we get to your impact, what do you hear from other patients? And what do you hear from other patient groups around the issue of driving? Like, what stories come up for you, and what could you share?
Well, to be charged to have THC in your system, even though you're using a prescribed drug as prescribed, and then still being booked by the police, or the police still looking to prosecute and create an element of criminality, is totally wrong. Yep. And that's where the patient amnesty needs to be put in place. You know, we've got all of these patients that are already in a position where, you know, your injuries or your illness are already impacting significantly on your life. And then you go out into public and you've got an anxiety attack, or, you know, hyper anxiety because you're driving around and seeing coppers looking for KPIs. Police, respectfully, police. But I think it's wrong. I think it's absolutely wrong. And we've got inconsistencies in state. We've got inconsistencies in state being Commonwealth jurisdictions as well. So you've got Jamaica and Canada that are all allowed to drive on prescription medicines, like you are with other prescription medicines. So, you know, there's a lot that needs to be addressed. And that's where I think patients need to get together as a collective that aren't going out and looking for funding, you know, to do these things, but together as a voice can submit paperwork and submit, you know, videos like this into the health and the transport minister, you know, all these sort of things that can be done to actually start chipping away at the edges and bring some empathy and compassion back to this.
Important. That is why we want to go into it today, and that context that you have provided. And I think patients get it. I think family members get it. Like, if you're a family member and you see your loved one going through it, and you see that potential trauma that's going on and the added stress, you just want to take that away. And so when there's issues that are out of your control, and when we have without getting too deep and going down different holes, that element of control for patients is already gone. Generally, they're in a situation. No one says, I want chronic pain. No one says, give me cancer. No one says, give me endo. No one says, give me a whole complicated area of these different medical conditions that often come in bundles as well, which leave people going, well, okay, if I am chronically unwell, I'm probably on the DSP, the disability support pension, because I can't work at my optimal level. So then we start looking at financial impact. So let's have a look. Maybe you don't have as much autonomy in your life as you would like because of the circumstances that are associated with your health. That then leads to some financial difficulty. Let's just take a punt and have a guess. What sort of impact does that then have on family functioning, particularly if you're a parent, particularly if you're a single parent? Yeah.
I was on a disability pension for 9 years, mate, you know, like, and how can anyone on disability actually afford any of the cannabis meds? It forces people to be doing illegal things.
I was on the pension as well, and I remember the area of anxiety, and I would open an invitation and just allowing you some time to prepare here while I share, and then I would like you to kind of give a bit of a run through of what has happened for you in terms of driving to give us that leg up. But I remember when I was on the pension, unable to work and chronically unwell, and I discovered cannabis. This is all prior to legalization, and we hadn't met yet, so I wasn't aware of what you were doing. We were up to our own things, and I can share that on another time, but all organic, all medicinal. That's all I'll share at this stage. And we had exhausted the first lot, and it was life-changing for me, life-changing, honestly. Hence why I'm still doing this now, right? Why we're both doing it now. And I do remember that when we knew that the first supply was running out, we were growing. So we were growing at my house, and then there was another house that was growing as well. And it was like art. One of my friends is, up there. And yeah, he got reported by neighbors. Came in, they stormed his house. There was a helicopter. It was just crazy. And he ended up going to court. He got what's called a Section 10. Yeah, so everyone that's not familiar with a Section 10 or who hasn't had a Section 10, not going to go into details there, and another story as well. But basically, he said in front of the judge, listen, my mate is a dying cancer patient, and I had to grow him medicine. Yeah. And so after we knew that they confiscated his phone as well, there were messages going back and forward because I was growing as well at my own house and didn't know what to do. And all we could do is we prepared our medical files and we just kept it at the front door. My mum was completely on side. My dad, bit old school. I've just started kind of taking cannabis as well. He's seen cannabis is growing in his backyard. He's trying to work out what's going on. I come home that day, I'm pretty frazzled, and we prepare this, and he's like, "What's going on?" Like, kind of a bit stressed, right? I do love this story though, and I'm sorry I've gone on for a little bit long, but there was just anxiety. I don't want the cops, I'm not doing anything wrong. Well, I am breaking the law, but I need this, and regardless of what they say, I need this in my body because look at how I'm living now compared to how I was. There was clear evidence, and so my dad, being my dad, so it was a Friday arvo and afternoon for the American audience there, but Friday afternoon, and he went out the back, had a couple of beers, probably like 4 to 5 beers. And he ended up coming back. Me and my mum were kind of hanging out a little bit. And he came back and said, okay, all right, so what are we going to do about the cops if they come? He said, I got an idea. And he had to go into his little cave and have his few beers for a while. But he came out and said, if anyone comes to this house, you tell them that it's me. What are they going to do to an old bloke like myself? And that was his moment of kind of going, we're not talking about drugs. I've seen what it's done to my son, and this is how much it means for me. And it's one of those tear jerks, me and my mum just went, yeah. And it's like, beautiful story. Love you lots, Dad. So thanks for taking that. So Mark, segueing that anxiety and that stress and also that capacity of my story to pull the family together and recognize this isn't a drug. Now, fast forward 8 years, we're still in a situation where patients are anxious, patients are stressed, and the only information that we get is let's wait another 2 years because we've got a clinical trial happening. And so we'll have a small group of patients that will help us get to where we get to. I totally understand that pathway. And obviously I believe in the clinical trials, but I think what you can explain right now is tell us a little bit about your story and we'll see where we get to. But yeah, first, let us know what happened.
Just before we do, my little brother's also illegally alive 5 years, from an esophageal cancer. He couldn't wait, so he had to also find a way to treat himself. So, mate, I've seen it firsthand, the impact in the communities that a plant can bring, the happiness also, the peace of mind, so, and the health. Anyway, so 2021, I came back from Peru. I re-entered the country about March. I did 3 weeks of quarantine because of the shitty laws back then. And then I moved down to Melbourne to build this company that I'm with. And I had to change over my New South Wales license to Victorian. And so I had a cannabis prescription from our good friend, Dr. Jose Ramirez at Cannavital, and presented that to Vic Roads and said, yeah, look, excuse me, on the form, there's, are you taking any sort of prescription medicine? So being progressive Australia with legal cannabis for medical patients, I thought, let's put it on the license. So I was honest and upfront, and having come back out of, international travel for the last, 3.5 years, I was out of the country. So thought I was doing the right thing. in the newfound cannabis industry in Australia, and got punished for it. I showed the Vic Roads my paperwork, put it on my license, and they gave me a letter stating that I had to provide a medical report showing that I was safe to use this product to
So,
be on the
mate,
road.
just to pause you there, at that time when they asked for that information, what had happened? So you'd had a prescription that you had obtained
But
to determine
yeah,
that you required this as a medicine. It was from a different jurisdiction, so you could see why they need some crossover, I imagine. But had anything come up on the roads, or was this just part of an application?
this was me just disclosing
Sure. So
being
you're being
completely honest
transparent. Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Well, we're a medical cannabis industry where legitimate patients are accessing product.
Yes.
How is it that we're not allowed to drive on the road yet?
Sure.
You know,
Okay.
why hasn't that been addressed legislatively?
Yes.
So, so, so I put all of that on my details, and they sent me a letter saying we need a medical report.
Mm-hmm.
We went into hard lockdown with COVID.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't aware that the doctor hadn't sent the report. Kept driving, thinking that nothing had happened. And that was September 30, 2021 was when there was a hard stop date on the letter saying that if we've not received the report by this date,
Yes.
we're going to cancel your license.
Sure.
I'd never received any other follow-up or any other further correspondence from Vic Roads. And then on the 20th of November 2022, I'd been driving. I'd driven to Brisbane, Canberra, all over the country, basically during COVID, when it was legal to. I got pulled over by the coppers, police, respectfully, on the 20th of November 2022, and they said you've got a medical suspension on your license. And I was like, what?
Mm-hmm.
And they said, are you on any drugs, or do you have epilepsy or diabetes or anything that impacts your driving? And I was like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. And they said, well, Vic Roads has cancelled your license. It's not the police. This is a unique case. You need to follow it up with Vic Roads. So I contacted Vic Roads, and they said, yeah,
Were you allowed to drive that day?
No, I had a mate that I was actually taking to the airport from America, and Tommy had to drive the car back home.
Okay.
So
from that date, the police said you can't drive.
Effective, immediate, yeah. And so I ran around and got all of my reports. So I got my osteo. So just so everyone knows, crush fracture of C3 and L1. So I'm lucky to be upright. So I get referred nerve pain in my hands. So I get really bad pins and needles. It's horrible. But anyway, cannabis has helped me deal with that. So I had an osteopath report, GP's report, cannabis doctor's report, Dr. Felix, shout out, an optometrist, and a specialist report, all stating that, if I use my prescription medicines like opiates as prescribed, there should be no reason why I can't be on the road.
And just to come in here, mate, just to confirm, I know who you're talking about with the shout out to Felix, an Australian authorized prescriber that prescribed you cannabis in Australia, along with all those other medical reports that you submitted, were all from Australia.
All from Australia, yeah.
Right.
I mean, I had to pay for them. It was, cost me maybe $1,200, but I submitted all that back into the medical review board of Vic Roads, to the head of driver safety and standards, and they then looked at my report, and based on all of the evidence that I provided and showing that I was safe and I was allowed to drive based on my prescription, Vic Roads reissued my license, and I got my license back on the 4th of January 2022.
Wow. 2023, mate. Yeah, 23. 4th of January 2023.
2023. Yeah, sorry,
Correct,
2023.
Yep.
But the police they had the opportunity to dismiss this case and withdraw, but the prosecutors sought to get a conviction on this. And so I've been going through court for the last sort of 12 months. And then on the 13th of the 10th, 2023, some might think that's a bad date, but my lawyer didn't front. And so I had to front the judge myself.
What date was it? Sorry.
13th of the 10th.
Yep. And
Friday
just before you get into that, what was the charges against you?
Driving whilst disqualified. So full loss of license and all of that sort of thing. They wanted to really make an example. And empathy prevailed. And on the day, Magistrate Tan, who said, I'm very sympathetic to this, I'd like to hear what's happened. When I said that I provided all of the evidence, he said, look, I'm very sympathetic with this. I know that you're not guilty and that you want to proceed, but this is the indication that I will dismiss this. So I'll dismiss it on a section 76. So it was approved but dismissed. But there was no charge and no fine. So
no charge, no fine. Does that mean there's a record or no record?
No record at all. I couldn't get a record because if I had a record, I couldn't work in the industry that I'm in, which is cannabis.
So that's been hanging over your head, whether or not your employment will be jeopardized, but yet you chose to still present that information at the start. Did you know that there were going to be the implications potentially? And I imagine that was with the Office of Drug Control, correct? Yeah. Yep. So you knew
that's
that
why I fought it. And that's why I said not guilty. I had to plead not guilty, and I was going to appeal everything as a not guilty charge because one, I'm a legitimate patient using a prescribed medicine as prescribed. I didn't actually test positive. So there you go again. Like there's all these inconsistencies. And so we've got to collectively unite as a patient group. And I mean, say 100 patients rocked up to Vic Road and said, I'm a legitimate patient. Here's all my paperwork from my specialist, proving that I'm safe to drive, proving that I can use this medicine as prescribed, allow me my license, like they do with diabetes medications, epilepsy medications, benzos, whatever it is, they do the same thing. I do have to do another report in 2025 and show that I'm still safe. But I've still got a license. I'm still allowed to go to my medical appointments. I can drive to work. I can drive to the shops and buy my food. So I'm not impacted or
and you can work.
And I can work.
What does this mean for other patients?
Well, I honestly think that as a collective in every state, we should have everyone that's a legitimate patient have all their paperwork together and go to the respective roads and transport authorities and say, I'm a legitimate patient. I want it recognised on my licence. Here's my reports. Approve me drive.
Yeah. And we will provide some information around all those reports that you have done. We'll make clear that there's Victoria and it's not legal advice, etc. But we've got a live case, which is right now, where there was huge impact around every domain of your life, right? And without getting, you're sharing too much, you've already disclosed a lot. Without that medicine, how is your pain? You're not even going to go there because you know that this is the only thing that controls the pain that you experience.
You sleep on your arm and you get those pins and needles. Try living with that 24/7. So so they were actually going to remove my medicine. I was going to have to go back onto the opiates, which took me 9 years to get off.
And it's not an option. Not an option.
No.
Not an option. Not an option.
No.
But it would have been.
Like, hey, you'll be fine to drive.
Exactly. So the message to others, mate, like what would you, as I said, like how significant is what you've gone through? Because I think what you've experienced is what a lot of people experience. And that is, I don't want to be caught. I maybe don't want to drive at night. I definitely don't want to drive that route. And there are people that may be taking that risk on a daily basis, while there may be others that are more risk averse and say, well, I'm not going to drive at all. And I don't know what those figures look like. And I know there's different patient groups that have been set up to look at getting some change. But this case example shows individual action that has been taken, that you've taken it with your own hands to say, this is not right. And I am going to advocate for change. And I am going to be the first one to go through, and so that other people can reference what has occurred. And now there is case law, I imagine, that has surrounded.
I'm guessing so, yeah. I mean, it's been dismissed when I've clearly broken a road and traffic law that they've said, you know, in the black and white. When you get into the grey of it, I haven't.
Yeah.
But and generally you don't walk away from a traffic charge like that. So the prosecutor actually said, we have to prosecute. And the judge said, well, I'm the magistrate.
Yeah.
I dismiss it.
What about this one? And speaking to you as a patient, all right? So let's put the patient hat on for a little bit and to say, oh, I've been listening to this, but listen, it's too hard. There's a lot that needs to be done. There's a lot that I need to do. What would your own message be to those patients that may be of a situation to be like, it's too much work to do?
Well, how important is your liberty and your freedom? Is it too much work? You know, so if you can actually change this and get an outcome for someone else, well, that's positive. It's worth every cent of it. It's worth every minute of it.
And that's
why I had to do it. I mean, I've been in this industry. I've seen the fuckery, and I'll say that with a capital F, you know, by patient groups, by businesses, by the regulator. It's all been fuckery, you know, where there's no collective united voice. We've got all these fragments of industry and patient groups all fighting because they all think they've got the right angle. You know, we're not fighting this collectively from a united front. We just aren't. Until all of us as patients actually take it into our hands and stop asking for leaders or saviors to do it, we're never going to get the change. It's, you know, what's that quote by Gandalf? You know, it's the little people that bring the change. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but it's like we've got to do it as individuals. And if each individual just starts to do it together, I mean, I'm happy to support 5 people do it. So if I can do 5 people, well, those 5 can do another 5, and they, you know, exponentially, we're all moving in the right direction. And as a patient voice, we need a patient voice that's just for patients, and amnesty and protection and product, not we need to do these fundraisers and we need to do all of that. And no, if we can all sing united, then the money will come to be able to fund that properly, because we've got clear objectives to target. You know, and if we can actually target them properly at a government level, well, that's where we affect the change. I mean, I've been in the protests, I've carried banners, I've shown, doesn't get anywhere. You know, we can yell and scream all we like. We've got to actually start looking at what we've got to target to change it. And we need to be talking to the regulator with some empathy, and actually getting some empathy from the regulator back, so we can start to work the fringes and actually start having a real collective industry. I mean, yes, great. We can use product in hospitals. That's a win. That's a big win.
Big win.
People are getting product. That's a big win.
Big win.
But still, the people that need it the most cannot afford it. That's a failure. We failed. We failed the ones that need it the most. You know, and that's the problem. We need to be actually protecting the sickest of us. You know, if we can't give them amnesty and protection, we've failed. You know, everyone's making money and selling product, but all these other people are still sick.
See the passion, man.
And
thank you I imagine if people are listening to this, and the patients that are listening to this going through that and hearing that passion, and hopefully watching it on YouTube, because I think it gives a better understanding. And I'm sure that some of the journeying that you've done and some of the voices that you represent in sharing that today have probably come up, and I think that's the significance and meaning. So thank you for sharing, bro.